Welcome to Legal Scholar Academy, where distribution of knowledge is a scholarly obligation.
Today I tell you a story of love, a universal story of love that will continue to inspire poets, novelists, artists, philosophers, mystics, and teachers of all times and all cultures and all religions. In fact, time and space are not barriers to the strength of this story. This story is a real story. It is not a figment of poetic imagination. It is not the plot of a novel. It is a real story that occurs in the area called Najd, where modern day Riyadh in Saudi Arabia is located. This story is about a boy and a girl who see each other in a school and fall in love forever with each other. The name of the boy is Qais and the name of the girl is Laila. Laila is an Arabic word which means night, and it is documented that Laila had beautiful black eyes and beautiful black hair, and therefore her name described her physicality. Qais was a boy who belonged to a tribe of Bedouins. Bedouins moved from place to place and from one area to the other. And Qais was the son of the leader of the Bedouin tribe. Bedouin leader called Amari was a gentle and a God-loving Muslim. This story takes place about 40 or 50 years after the death of Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him. Prophet Muhammad died in 632 and Qais died in 686. So we are not sure when Qais was born, but Qais died within 60 years after the Prophet's death. And the historians tell us that both families of Qais and of Laila, they were Muslims. And this story has become an important story of love in the Muslim world because both Laila and Qais were Muslims. If they were not, or if the story had taken place before the advent of Islam, this story would have very little value for Muslims across the world. Even though this story in its basic structure is factual, but there are certain details which are disputed. The central story is like this, that Qais and Laila fall in love with each other, and Qais would like to marry Laila, but Laila's family did not accept Qais's proposal of marriage, partly because Laila's family believed that Qais was not sane, he was a madman. And that's why Qais was called Majnun, which is an Arabic word for someone who has lost his mind. So this story is known as LailaMajnun. And this accurately describes the two central lovers of this story. Majnun, one who has become insane in love, and Laila, the beautiful Arab girl with black hair and black eyes. who loves Majnun as much as Majnun loves Laila. So because Laila's family refused the marriage proposal, Majnun was dejected, and in utter despair, he left the tribe and started wandering in the desert. Laila was married to another man and moved to Iraq, and as the husband died, Laila was in search of Majnun, but they could not meet each other. Laila died, and so did Majnun, and the two were buried in the same grave. So even though they could not be united in life, they are united in dust on the cold bed of the grave. The two lovers have been united. So this central story is not disputed, but the details are disputed. And different historians and different versions of these stories are based upon different facts around this central plot. So I have done some research on this, and I would give you a story that I think perhaps is more accurate in its description. And if it is not accurate, it nonetheless is a story that captures some of the most interesting points of love. The story begins like this, that Majnun or Qais was the son of the tribal chief, and the tribe was a Bedouin tribe. And the leader of the tribe, Amari, he was expecting a son. So he asked the palmists and the astrologers and the people who predicted future that what kind of son he is going to have. Several astrologers and palmists and other predictors got together, and they reached a consensus that Amari's son would become mad. He would lose his mind early in his childhood. Even though the predictors did not tell Amari blatantly and clearly that his son would become insane in his childhood, but Amari could tell and could read in between the lines. So he tried to do everything in order to reverse the determination of fate. And he believed that good deeds can perhaps reverse the dictates of fate. So he started giving more charity. He started being nice to the tribesmen and women. And he prayed, and as a true Muslim, he prayed to God that his son would become a normal adult and would not suffer from insanity. So the child was born, Qais was born, was a normal, beautiful child, and he grew normally, and it seemed as if the prayers had been listened to, and God has reversed the fate of Qais. In order to further protect Qais from any untoward event, the father sent Qais to Damascus for studies in a school under the guidance of a good teacher. In Damascus, Qais did very well in school, and he was a very favorite student of the teacher because he studied very hard and his interest in the books was intense. Many other students were jealous that Qais, a Bedouin's son, has become so favorite with the teacher. And many of these students belong to privileged families of Damascus. So they were a bit jealous of Qais, who was good in studies and who was doing everything right to get the favorite attention of the teacher. But then something suddenly happened. One day a new student was admitted to the school, and this was Laila. In Damascus, the school was coeducational, and the boys and girls studied together. So when Laila was admitted to this school, she was admitted into the same class where Qais was studying. Laila and Qais see each other and fall in love. This was love at first sight. This was instant love. This was love that was preordained. And this was the love that would make Qais Majnun. Qais was no longer interested in the books. He wanted to read the looks of Laila. Laila was also not interested in the books. She also wanted to see what Qais was doing, and she only wanted to read Qais. She did not want to read anything else. Everybody noticed that Qais and Laila are totally engrossed with each other, and they are lost in each other, and they have no sense of time and space around them, or who's around them. They have no sense of the teacher around them. This intense absorption into each other was noticed. The teacher tried with both students to tell them that books were important and they should refrain from paying so much attention to each other and not paying any attention to the books. As always, the story of love, like perfume, cannot be confined, and the story began to go outside the walls of the school, and it reached to both families, the family of Qais and the family of Laila. The family of Laila decided to take Laila out of the school because they didn't want an image of the family to be tarnished, that their daughter has fallen in love with the son of a Bedouin family. So the lovers were separated, and it was very difficult for both lovers to bear the pain of separation. It is said that during the school, before the lovers were separated, the teacher would punish Qais for not paying attention to the books, and he would cane Qais' hands, and it is said that the wound of the cane was seen on Laila's hands. So the two were so close, even in physicality, that if one body was punished, the other body showed the wounds of punishment. So Laila and Majnun were separated, and Majnun later on uh, was brought back to the family from Damascus, and the father, who knew that his prayers had not been answered, decided to take his son to Mecca and pray Allah over there that his son would forget Laila and therefore become normal again. So Sardar Amari, Qais's father, took Qais to Makkah, where House of God is located. And there he asked Qais to pray to Allah that his state of mind would be healed, that he would forget Laila, and his pain would be relieved, and he would become a normal person again. But when Qais prayed, he did not pray to get rid of his love, but he thought that freedom from love is not something he wanted. He wanted to remain in the chains of love. So he prayed not for sanity, but for the continuation of love. Dejected, the family came back. They tried everything within their means to heal Majnun from the love of Laila, but this was incurable state of mind. Eventually, Qais leaves the family and begins to wander in the desert. He takes off all his clothes and wanders naked in the deserts among the animals of the desert. It is described that animals don't harm Majnun, but they love him and they protect him, and they seek his company as he cries, Laila, Laila, Laila. Majnun also writes poetry, sometimes in the sand with a stick, sometimes he reads poem in the air, facing the house of Laila, or facing towards the house of Laila. Nobody knows where Majnun is. The family leaves food at a place where they might think Majnun would come back if he is hungry, but the food is never eaten, and the food remains as it was placed in the place. On the other hand, Laila is married to a man, and the couple leaves Najd and moves to Iraq. It is believed that the marriage was never consummated, and even though Laila did not object to the marriage because she did not want to displease her father, she did not consummate the marriage with her husband. Her husband died, and Laila came back to Najd in search of Majnun, but Majnun was nowhere to be found. And eventually, heartbroken, Laila dies. And when the death news, no matter how it was reached, no matter how it reached Qais, when Qais learned about the death of Laila, he returned to Najd and reached the grave where Laila was buried, and he died, and eventually he was buried in the same grave. Now this story raises a lot of important questions, and I will discuss 3 or 4 which are most important lessons of this story. The first lesson is love is always frustrated by social barriers. Here, the social barrier was the tribal barrier that Laila's tribe and Cassie's tribe, there were separations between the two tribes. And even though Laila's father was willing to receive the marriage proposal with kindness, yet he did not want to marry his daughter to someone who was known as a madman in the community. So there was some social barrier in the meeting of the two lovers. But there was also another barrier, and that was the barrier of rationality. It seems that love is incompatible with rationality. Love and rationality may not go together. And I think the greatest lesson of this love story is that love and rationality, love and the rational customs of the community, love and rational behavior and expected within a community may not be compatible. And therefore, when two lovers behave abnormally, when they cross the limits of normal behavior in the community does not want them to be together. So in other words, love is accomplished within the rational constraints of the community. And whenever lovers cross the rational limits set by the community opposes the meeting of the lovers. And we see that the social barriers or the normal behaviors of a community continue to be the separation walls between lovers. Whether these social barriers are of religion, whether these social barriers of race or class or nationality or language or other social barriers, they continue to pose threats to the meeting of lovers. So the story of Laila and Majnun is still with us in the sense that even though human civilization has evolved, yet we see that social barriers continue to frustrate the meeting of the lovers. The second lesson that we learn from the story of Laila and Majnun is that love is instant. It is preordained. It cannot be cultivated. Now, our understanding of relationship today is that a good relationship is cultivated. You have to make an effort in order to make a good relation possible. And a sustainable good relationship needs vigilance and constant cultivation and attendance. But that is not the lesson of the love story of Laila and Majnun. Here the love story begins in the innocence of the childhood, when physicality is relatively unimportant. Laila and Qais were in pre-adolescent age, so sexuality was subliminal, if at all, was a factor in their mutual attraction. They were not attracted to each other primarily because of sexual attraction, but they were attracted to each other instantly by a different kind of force that may be called a force of love that is metaphysical, that is not confined to the physical body. Now, such metaphysical love is possible only by looking through the eyes of the lovers. Even lovers look into each other's eyes in order to receive confirmation of the metaphysical love. Physical love is based on the physical body, and therefore lovers are attracted to each other by the physical bodies, and therefore a good physical body may be the source of attraction. But a metaphysical love, a love that is not confined to physicality, is communicated to each other through the eyes. And therefore the eyes are the most important source of information for the lovers. If you want to see if somebody loves you, you have to look into their eyes and see how do you feel. So this metaphysical love is even though metaphysical love is hard to recognize, but if you want to see it, you have to see it in the eyes of the lovers. So this idea that metaphysical love cannot be cultivated and it is instant is the theme of the LailaMajnun story. So even the separation of physical bodies does not diminish the love. In fact, the separation of physical bodies intensifies the feelings of love, as we see in the case of Laila and Majnun. When they are separated, the intensity of their love becomes even more strong, and they miss each other, and they experience each other much more intensely in separation than they did when they were together in the school in Damascus. The other thing that we learn from this story is that prayers cannot reverse the state of love. You cannot remove the state of love by praying to God, because even God does not remove the state of love. God does not accept any prayers which would remove love from the hearts of the lovers. Such prayers are never answered. And therefore, when Cassie's father takes him to Mecca in order to pray for sanity, that prayer was bound to fail, because God does not listen to anti-love prayers. God is a lover, and God protects love. And therefore, any prayer where seeker is trying to seek the removal of love will never be listened by God. And that's why we know that even though Cassie's father prayed for the removal of love, Qais himself never prayed for the removal of love. Because even in Makkah, he was saying that I want to continue with my love for Laila. And oh God, please don't remove this feeling of love or this state of love from my heart. So we see that prayer is ineffective in removing the feelings of love. The third thing that we learn from this story is that metaphysical love is universal. It is not confined to any one language or to any one time or to any one country or to any one tribe. Now the story of LailaMajnun has become universal. It has been more than 1400 years since this event took place. but the story of Laila and Majnun is still alive. Actually, in the 11th century, um, a great poet of Azerbaijan wrote the classic story of love in the form of a long poem. This poet's name is Nizami Ganjavi, and he lived in a city called Ganji in Azerbaijan. He spoke Persian, and he wrote the story in Persian, in Farsi. It is believed that he did extensive research and collected all the versions of the story, and then spent a huge amount of time and resources in writing this story, and that has become the most authentic and the most well-known version of the story, written in the 11th century. Ironically, this was the time when Western Europeans were engaged in the Third Crusade. Just before the story was written, the Muslims, under the leadership of Suleiman, took over Jerusalem, and the kings of France and Germany and England, they wanted to take away Jerusalem back from the Muslim rule, and therefore they launched the Third Crusade against the Muslims. This crusade was launched in 1187, and it lasted for 5 years till 1192. And Nizami Ganjavi was writing this great story of love while the crusade was taking place against the Muslims in Jerusalem. So that's the irony of universal love also, that love does not stop even when bloodshed is taking place in another part of the world. Nizami Ganjavi wrote a beautiful story of love in beautiful language, and his story was translated into many other languages, including English, and the English version of the story is still available, and it has inspired a lot of metaphysical and mystic works on it. It is also believed that the story, even though it reached in the written form in the 19th century to England, the story in its oral form was available in all parts of the world for centuries. So some speculate that even Shakespeare knew this story, and therefore the story of Romeo and Juliet was inspired by the story of LailaMajnun. And it is unclear whether Shakespeare actually knew about this story, and the scholars are divided over whether Shakespeare knew the story of LailaMajnun when he wrote Romeo and Juliet. But that is not important. I think what is important is that a story of universal love like Laila and Majnun would continue to inspire the poets and the artists and the filmmakers and the philosophers and the Sufis, because each person gets his or her food from a story of universal love. Now we know that in India many beautiful stories, films have been made on the story of Laila and Majnun. And even in the Arabic language, a new version of Laila and Majnun has been constructed in Egypt. So the story is alive, and it will never die, because this is a story of love that knows no ending and that continues to inspire the human species for all times to come. Thank you very much for listening to this story. This is Ali Khan, and I would come back to you with another story of universal